One review. Book one was all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's the author of the book Born to Rest, none other than Miss Lindsay Stadel. Welcome, Miss Lindsay, on Book One review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yes, I am Lindsay Stadel. I am a suicide attempt survivor, and I decided to share my story in a collaboration book, Born to Risk, that talks about the demons that I was facing leading up to my suicide attempt, and then what has happened in my life post attempt.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Lindsay. Yes, thank you. The phrase born to rest suggests an innate, almost distinct calling. Do you believe people are truly hardwired for rest, or is it a skill anyone can cultivate?
I think both. I do believe that there are people out there that are hardwired to seek out risk in their everyday life. There's the fishermen that are out in the Bering Sea, the crab fishermen. That is a risky job. But then there's people like me who have a moment of weakness and a time in my life where I walked through hell, and it was not my intention to put myself in that situation. And so once I decided to make the jump from the moving truck and then survived, that was the greatest risk of my life.
How does someone know if they are born to rest? Is it feeling, a pattern of behavior, or something else?
I think there's many ways that people can tell if they are born to risk. They there are people that naturally seek out, skydiving, rock, ledge jumping. There's people who do that for fun. Um, and then there's also people who do that once in their lifetime because they just want that one individual moment of freedom. And it really takes courage to be able to seek out those risky situations.
Risky situation. Well, Miss Lindsay, what is the fundamental difference between a calculated risk taker and a reckless thrill seeker?
I think there's really not much difference, I don't believe. It is just in the way people live their life. I'm married to a farmer, and he takes risks every single day, in his life because the cattle that he works could potentially harm him if they are wild. The rain might not come in a growing season, and we might not have the crops that we need. That is risky every single day. But I do believe that there's also a very fine line when it comes to calculated risks and unintentional risks.
Unintentional risk. Wow, interesting. Miss Lindsay, can the born to risk temperament be a curse in a modern society that often prioritize safety, security, and conformity?
I really do think that there is all of that. When you pick up the Born to Risk book, you are reading stories from people just like you and me in their everyday life and sharing their biggest risk that led to their greatest reward. And when you have this collaboration book, you're not just getting one story. You can buy a story from someone and it's just theirs. But something like this, when you can have 25, 50 people in the same book sharing their risky story, I really believe that it's a lot deeper than an individual, or it could be a lot deeper than an individual book because you are sharing that with 25 other authors.
Miss Lindsay, on psychology and motivation, what is the core psychological drive or driver for the ultimate risk taker? Is it the pursuit of a peak experience, the need of to fuel truly alive, or a quiet way of internal noise?
I think there's definitely a fuel that people have, that tells them that they need or want to take this risk. But for me, there wasn't a fuel there. It was very quiet and internal, and it was a battle that I was fighting. My daughter knew that I was fighting a mental and psychological battle, but I would not listen to her. So it really, everybody's different. Everybody's, you know, mind is different. And, two people can be put in the same exact situation and respond differently.
How does the brain of a serial risk taker process fear differently? Is it about suppressing fear or transforming its energy, Miss Lindsay?
I believe that it could be, so really they're suppressing that fear depending on what they're doing. They don't want people to know that they're afraid to do it. And so they're going to put that in the back of their mind and they're going to take that risk. Even though they're afraid to do it, they're not going to let on. And I think that that is for anybody. Whether you're just a once in a lifetime risk taker or an everyday risk taker, I believe that everybody has that fear and they have to overcome it to be able to take that risk. And once that risk is taken, then I think that with some people, they're hardwired, or they it changes. It'll definitely change them, and that will either tell them no more. I jumped out of a plane once, I'm not doing it again. Or it'll say I need to do this all the time. I need to do this every day.
Is there a relationship between early life trauma or adversity and the development of a born to race mentality, Miss Lindsay?
I believe there is. I grew up in a divorced household. I had brothers and sisters who were not kind. I was attacked as a teenager, and all of that changed me. I think that when you are put in those situations, you can either go down the dark path or go down the light path. And it just really depends on everybody's brain chemistry. Um, but when you make those calculated risks, it's going to either give you joy or it's going to give you healthy fear. And then that's when, your childhood trauma will take over. You might not remember the childhood trauma as an adult, but once you let that fear take over your body, take over your brain, you're going to relive that childhood trauma, and then that's, I believe, when people start making those or taking those risks that they wouldn't otherwise have taken.
Miss Lindsay, is there a relationship between early life trauma or adversity and development for burn to risk argument or something that inborn in our brain cells?
I think a lot of it is already hardwired into your brain when you're born,
Mm.
because like I had said before, there can be two people put in the same exact situation and they're going to act 100% different, and that is based upon their brain chemistry. And so when someone's born, I do believe in fate, and I do believe that you can change the outcome. You definitely have control of your own life, but there is still the path that you are supposed to be going down. And if you alter that life's path, then you are taking a risk that was not predetermined when you were born.
For the entrepreneur or innovator, how can they channel these born to risk energy constructively rather than gambling their entire company on a hunch?
Every single entrepreneur is taking a risk every single day. We run 4 family-owned businesses, and every single day we take a risk. For that entrepreneur to be out there trying to create their company or grow their company, they're gonna need help, and they're gonna be risking everything, because if they don't succeed, then they may have just, lost their entire life savings.
Miss Lindsay, what can the average person who may not be a base a jumper or a startup founder learn from the born to risk mindset to improve their own lives?
The Born to Risk movement is uh, more than just taking risk. I mean, the cover of the book has a shark. The person on the cover of the book is swimming with a shark. And that's not the only risk, that you can take, the dangerous ones. There's With the Born to Risk movement, there's people who um, grew up in an abusive household or are domestic violence survivors, but there's also people who um, are just telling the story about starting their own company, quitting corporate America to start their entrepreneurship. And so when you read a book that's part of the Born to Risk movement, you are getting to read about and learn how other people's lives are different than yours and how they were able to face their greatest risk and the success that led afterwards. So I think everybody's got some sort of risk taking in them, and joining the Born to Risk movement is about sharing that risk and telling your truth.
Telling the truth indeed. And Miss Lindsay, as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
My short-term goals are definitely, I've got 3 more books, co-author books coming up within the next few months. But for my long-term goals, I want to be able to get onto stages in front of youth groups or in front of um, church groups, in front of a room of CEOs or, managers or what have you, and share with them the signs to look for in someone who is mentally ill, because there are people in everyday life putting on a smile that are falling apart inside. And all that someone needs might just be that one person to come up and say, "How is your day going? How are you feeling today?" And when you have the training, or when you know what to look for, it's easier to spot those people that might just need a little bit of help today.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Lindsay, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you?
Um, I I like to go back to 3 simple words. You are enough. Because when you remind yourself that you are enough, you're reminding yourself that you do not have to prove your worth. You do not have to pretend, and you do not have to apologize for who you are. So if you're looking for that success or that little push that you need to go out there and start your own business or write your own book, just remember that you are enough.
You are enough for sure, and stop procrastinating and share your books to the world. Write and write and write if you have the passion. And
Yes.
thank you for that advice, Miss Lindsay. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
I'm sorry, to recommend what?
A book or books that influence your journey.
A book influencer that hmm, um
It's okay
I
if you recommend your book.
well, there's so many. I There's books from Life's Checkmark. There's books from L.S. Kirkpatrick, and there's so many books out there that are the Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities book, and that are talking about or sharing stories from people in everyday life. They're co-author books, just like the Born to Risk is. And when you buy those books, you get so much more than just stories.
Thank you for that recommended book, Miss Lindsay, our books. And what is the most valuable lesson you have learned from a race that failed spectacularly?
The most valuable lesson I have learned is that what if equals fear, and even if equals faith. My therapist taught that to me. If you're having a what if moment, well, a good example is writing your own book. What if I want to write my own book, but I'm not successful? Turn that into even if. Well, even if I write my own book and I am not successful, then I will try to become part of a co author book. And then that way I'm still getting part of my story out there.
Miss Lindsay, is there a point where a risk taker should retire their instinct, or is the drive permanent?
I think the drive is permanent. I don't think anybody should retire something that they enjoy doing. And if taking risks in your everyday life is something you enjoy doing, then I would do it until the very last day. I wouldn't give up on something like that.
So, how do you calculate the risk of not taking a risk? What is the cost of a life lived in avoidance of a big leaps?
I think if you try to avoid risk, your brain is going to keep trying to push you into it. And then it could turn into something that you did not plan for. Um, and I will use my suicide attempt as a great example. I was taking risks for several years by hiding who I really was. And once I finally was able to break away from that, my brain was so sick that I couldn't see any other way to live. So I definitely would not try to avoid the risk taking if that is where you are wanting to go, because if you do avoid it, it could turn disastrous in the future.
Looking at the greatest challenges facing humanity, how do we need to be born to risk mentality to help solve them, Miss Lindsay?
I think the way that would, at least for my opinion, the way that would work in everyday society is, asking yourself, do you feel like this is something that you need to do? Um, do you feel like this is something you can afford to do? And do you have a support system that can help you through it? If you don't have a support system that could hinder your um, your ability to, I've got a fly bothering me, I'm so sorry.
No
Um,
worries.
if you don't have help, it could hinder your ability to take calculated risks, because when you don't have someone in your corner, that's when the uncalculated risks happen. And there's sometimes that you can't come back from that.
Miss Lindsay, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract poetry in second season. I'm a book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 love letters. Movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season, and science 101, sex 101 second season, and my baby podcast, Law 101, and Mental Health 101, and Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Lindsay, ultimately, what is the greater purpose of embracing this identity? Is it a personal fulfillment, a legacy, evolution, or something else entirely?
I think that it's a combination of personal and legacy because when you have your father or your mother, your grandfather taking these risks as you're growing up and you're seeing them, then you might want to follow in their footsteps. But on the other hand, you might decide not to follow in their footsteps, and that could be a risk in its own, you know, all on its own, trying to not carry on in the family business.
Yes, indeed. And Miss Lindsay Stadel, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite the listeners to support your book itself? Miss Lindsay,
Yes.
can you please invite our listeners to support Born to Rest?
Oh, yes. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find my book Born to Risk on the website. You can reach out to me through the website. I think you will find some amazing stories in that book, and there's also volume one available as well. And you will not be disappointed.
Yes, people, I support Miss Lindsay Stadel because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering Burn to Risk will rise. So, Miss Lindsay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bodycon people, see you soon.